Hey, I'm Lauren Trudeau. I'm one of the member artists, and I'm here introducing our second artist talk today by Nicole Patrice. And you'll see she does this amazing multimedia work, and she says that she's used to talking and she needs no other further introduction.
Thank you. Hi everybody, and thank you for coming. Also, I just want to say, I know this isn't the awards, but thanks to all my friends, because I have a really good support system who's been there for me and helped with framing and with just coming to my shows and dealing with me and all of my work and everything else. So I want to thank them. So I'm working on a new body of work. I've been a member here for a while, and I've developed in different ways, but mostly subject matter has changed a bit, but it still remains all in all about liminal states, I guess is the way to say it. So it's a lot about transformation, transition, decay, and growth, and the in-between sort of area. And so my artwork has really, if I look back at it all, has been about that the whole time. I want to start with what it's about. So What Breaks Becomes is the title that I titled the show. And first of all, I started out with an interest in the idea of fracture. And I'll start by beginning with, it came up with using eggs. And probably for the same reasons that Cassandra talked about. Eggs was a big deal in our society. And so every time we had breakfast, we saved our eggs, because I was like, I'm going to do something with this. So I cooked the eggs and crushed them, and then later on used them in prints. But what was happening with all of that, of course, is our economic issues and things that a lot of us were unhappy with. And so I was also thinking about what happens when things fracture and what's going to happen as things decline afterwards. And so this can happen whether it's personal, whether it's political, structures, anything. They can break, but then there's a transformation. And so a lot of my shows have been about my mom, who died of COVID in 2020, and the transitioning from that life into who I've become now. And so it all relates, though, in some way. It's all kind of captured by this idea that things break, but there's beauty in the transitions that occur. So we can find hope. We can find change. And change isn't just a bad thing. Change can be a very good thing, too. Transformation is a main theme. So after something breaks, it could be a body, a memory, a belief, a structure, system. It could be your sense of self. What happens afterward? It's no longer whole, but yet it doesn't disappear. There's still a sense of what happened. We still have a history with everything, but it changes. And so you are carrying along this evidence of what happened to you, or whatever happened is carrying along the evidence, the history of what happened to that. That's where my title comes in. Breaking is not simply an ending. It can also be a beginning, a threshold, or a turning point. And I explore the emerging ruptures, what could endure after damage, how repair can create something new rather than return to something of its original state. And so in my work, you're going to see some gold, you're going to see a lot of cracking, and there's a major reference to kintsugi, which is the Japanese practice of repairing broken ceramics, and you repair them with lacquer mixed with like powdered gold. And the cracks, in this case, between the pottery shards, they're no longer hidden, they're emphasized. And so the repair becomes part of the object, basically beauty and its meaning. So I'm drawn to it because it treats that breakage as a history rather than failure. And the fracture becomes what would be evidence of survival. So kintsugi relates to wabi-sabi as well. So I have some artwork here that I use that as a title, but that's the Japanese aesthetic and philosophical idea where you're finding beauty in imperfection, in impermanence and weathering, and in incompleteness. So it values worn surfaces, the irregular edge, trace of time, objects that bear the marks of use and change. So for me, it connects deeply to printmaking also because when you're using print processes, you often, most of the time you're using pressure, transfer, often layering. There are accidents that happen, the happy accidents sometimes, erosion and residue, all these kind of things belong to printmaking. And so image that's made through contact transforms as it changes. And so I call my pieces mixed media prints. Usually there's some sort of foundation in printmaking, but I add the hands in later. So I used especially these to start over here, this end. I used collagraphs, a little bit of etching, some handwork in there. And then on this end, I have rust printing, some watercolor, some drawing, and pronto plate lithography. So collagraphs give a texture, and they apply a lot of pressure and give an embossment to a print. The pronto plate lithography allows for more of like a drawn, transferred look, sometimes atmospheric marks. And then rust printing actually is the introduction of time and chemical transformation. And it's the basis of, meaning the bottom of these three works here. Watercolor is then added for staining, softness, transparent qualities. And then I draw and I bring the hand back in using gesture and line, that kind of thing. So this is my mixed media. The processes allow the images to feel more like they're accumulated rather than just composed. So just like time and things layered and added onto the surface, it's supposed to feel like it's actually gone through something. It's taken a beating a little bit, like we all do in life. There's always something we can connect on that, you know. There are cracked forms, there are circular structures, suspended pod shapes, vertebrae, bone-like marks, root strips, stains, gold fragments. They're not things that are uncommon to my work. I've used these type of things before in different ways. They're supposed to suggest, in this case, eggs, often vessels, cells, moons, eyes, seeds, bones, relics, that kind of idea. I did a series where I started talking about the microcosm and the macrocosm of the world and how things sort of just like look the same as you go. I'm like,
Yeah, the science.
yeah, it is. Well, science and art is very
You have some.
close, very close. Absolutely right. I was thinking that when you were talking, you know? Like the cracks that you see between these, I mosaicked the pieces of the eggshell together, actually, rather than just a random kind of selection of them. When you look between the cracks, it looks like veins, it looks like branches, it looks like rivers running, you know? So on a whole, you know, it's the small is like the large. So I found that through this too, and so it just keeps coming up over and over again. So these are the kind of things I try to show in my artwork recently. But I'm interested in the ambiguity it causes. The work can exist between states, and this is where liminal states come in. It can be between like a body and a landscape, ruin and growth, interior and exterior, collapse and becoming. It's kind of obscure that way. So I did I'll point to a couple of the artwork specifically. The first one that I have here is called The Necessary Rupture. And so when I was composing it, I was thinking of breaking the circular pattern, separating it. And I did that, but I was also thinking of course, our times, because, you know, how could we not? And floods that will be a-coming one day, and cities that'll be wiped out. So there's some gridded patterns for our cities there and water. But more vaguely, it's not just about the destruction. It's almost a passage. So just because, you know, it's a terrible thing, right? It could make us aware, make us change, make the transformation possible to something that's better. So the idea of having like gold and all of these and that kind of thing shows us that there is a way that just because we have this rupture, we can, you know, move on from it and get, fingers crossed, better. Yeah. So I have one called The Long Becoming, and that's this one. And so there's a circular center here that has a little bit of etching in it. I obliterated the etching a little bit with some line work and some pencil work, but it really could be anything from a seed or the world, or, you know, any of those kind of things that we see, but it's definitely got cracks in it, it's definitely rough. It shows that endured pressure, and cracks are still present, but they're more integrated in it. And it reflects that idea that transformation is slow. So repair can be slow, and growth after rupture, it's not a return to what it was before. So we're not going back, we're transforming into something new. So it's the formation of something that's been altered. And so, let's see. I'm gonna flip down to this one right here. This is called Evidence of Survival. And you kind of see like this egg shape sort of like lingering in the center there. So I just want to say, to interrupt the flow of the theme, but in terms of using printmaking and changing it, you can have a print and you can do it over and over again, and it can look very similar, or you can change them and make them one-offs. And so what I did was took, for the most part, there might be one different plate in here, but a repetition of plates, and changed the look of them. But we've got a circular form again, and you've got the cracks and the broken surfaces and the gold. And the gold also goes back to the kintsugi seams as we're putting things back together. It's kind of archaeological in a way, as if something was unearthed. And it's meant to feel like it's a repaired vessel or something broken, yet it's still being held together. And there's still that lingering hope too, because we've got this egg, and eggs are related to birth and, you know, something new. So a couple of other pieces that I did was awakening through fracture. So like I said, the base of these artworks over here, they start with a rust print. And awakening through fracture has this eye in it. And so the eye suggests perception and consciousness, and seeing differently after the rupture. We only see true things sometimes until after it breaks. Like we need something to happen in order to be awakened, that kind of thing. And so the break will interrupt our habits. It exposes what's hidden. It creates this new kind of knowledge. So that's along the lines of what I was thinking. And work here that you see seems a little bit disconnected, but in terms of the fact that these don't have the vertebrae in them, and they're a little more fluid in the painting style. But it's called spiral structure break, and so the idea is that vertebrae is internal, and it is our scaffolding. It's the thing that holds us up. It's the structure. It suggests ancestry too. It suggests memory. It suggests that past life and the survival. And so you have the DNA spiral here, and it is flowing and moving along here, and then at the end there's breakage in it. And so we see that origin to like movement, the origin of formation to movement to the rupturing. And it transitions into this piece over here, which is about rust. So rust in my work has been extremely important for a while now. I started doing art about abandoned buildings. I'd go in there, I'd photograph them, I'd make prints out of them, do different processes with it. And so like, I love the textures that I find. I love the bits and pieces that I can pick up in these places. And so rust is an obvious transition in a way from that. And so it's not something that I can fully control. It changes, it oxidizes over time. You can do different things to it to make it move. And so it has time, and through contact and moisture and then reaction, it transforms. And on paper and also on the actual steel or piece of metal, it creates stains, it creates blooms, it creates unpredictable marks, and it's evidence of oxidation, exposure, decay. It's also visually rich and generative. I made a gridded series of small photographs called Wabi Sabi Rust, and the images document the rust as it changes during the contact printing process that I do. And so when I'm starting out a print and I have the rust underneath, a lot of people always ask about how I do rust printing, so I'll just give a quickie. I keep the paper moist. I use a piece of printmaking heavy-duty paper. You can also use Japanese papers, fabric. It's definitely a fabric process. I wet it. I stick a piece of rust on top. After I also put some vinegar on it, stick the piece of rust, put some plastic wrap on top of it, and let it suffocate it, and kind of like basically building a terrarium inside of it of moisture and weird things that bleed onto surfaces that leaves blooms and stains and all sorts of cool things. But there are different things you can do chemically, different things you can add. It's not just vinegar, there are different types of vinegars, tannins, there's all array of things, and I've made scientific studies of each little piece, even though science was never my thing, or math. You know, made these kind of things and just sort of laid out a lab of things to see how it works a little bit better and how I could control something that was not really controllable. But this time around, I love the way the rust looked more than the paper. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes I love my paper prints and they're wonderful, and I end up covering them less or in the process, or I'm like, oh my God, I can't touch this. This looks great, you know? But this time I really love the rust. So I took photographs of the rust, and each photograph of it records a temporary state, a moment that would continue to change if it was left alone. As you know, rust oxidizes, but it changes even when it's open to the air. If it's liquefied, it's still getting eaten away by the vinegar and all the stuff that's corroding it. So, I mean, it could eventually be nothing. So it's always in this constant state of change. And the grid becomes basically this archive of impermanence. And rust images show surfaces breaking down, but become more visually complex. And I started seeing things in it with the pareidolia, you know, this is a forest, this is a person, this is What appears to be decay can also become image, meaning, and transformation. And that's why I included it. So looking ahead, and also in this work on the wall, my work, of course, is exploring repair beyond the personal. Fracture can be emotional. It can also be cultural, political, environmental, or historical. And I've been working more in the future. We'll have works more about that, a little less personal, because of our times, of course. We have monuments that fall, systems that fail, landscapes that are eroding, animals that are struggling. You know, of course, they're very important to me. Bodies are changing. Our memories fragment, and within all of these breaks, there's new structure and meaning. There's this transformation into something else. So just to recap the gold in the work, it's not just decorative. It's actually marking interruption. It's calling attention to damage. It suggests the possibility of repair. But it's not erasing the fracture. It's not taking away what broke. As we know, a lot of our history has attempted to be erased lately. So we're not doing this, we're keeping that, but we're observing how it's helped us transform and change into something more. We're not looking away from it, it brings us into it. So what breaks becomes proposes that brokenness is not the opposite of wholeness. It is part of how wholeness is reimagined. The fracture remains visible, the repair remains visible, the history remains visible, and through visibility, something new begins to form.
Okay, let's see what kind of questions we have for Nicole at this point. Go ahead, April.
On these photographs, are these details of plates that you just composed them all in a square and photographed the part of a plate you liked?
Yes, absolutely. So they weren't large plates. I used they were actually a little bit bigger than this, and they were parts that I thought appealed more than others. So I did crop. I worked with levels, but for the most part, the rust actually did look like this. So I just want to point that out because there's color in there and everything, and I did not really mess with the color too much. I didn't make it any different, just heightened it a little bit.
So it's really arranged like that?
Yeah.
Yellow, orange, red, black?
Mm-hmm. Some green, even, yeah. Yeah, so.
And the way it travels is?
Yeah, that's with the liquids, and the rust was Corten steel that I used for this particular piece, and it was pre-rusted. I didn't rust it myself, although sometimes I have to. What happens with the rust after this process, and the reason why it's good to actually photograph it if you like it, is because the next time around, it starts to flake off. It gets heavy, it gets thick. If you're using really concentrated stuff, which I do, it'll start to break apart eventually. If anybody does printmaking in here, I know a couple people that do. If you leave a plate in an acid too long, there's no longer a plate. That's what's happening here. It corrodes it until there's nothing left. So it'll break apart, flake apart, or it will also flake off so that you can see the silver of the steel underneath, and you can sand and restart the process again. Depends on how deep your plate is, how thick, what the gauge is, how much you can get out of a plate actually. But it's always constantly changing, and then it's open to the air and oxidation when you're done too. So there's more that's going on there.
I have a question about the actual rust on the print, like on the paper after you do the process, the vinegar or whatever you use. After it's done, you take it out and let the paper dry. Is that like then stay permanent?
Good question. So that too is open to oxidation. If you coat it with something that's like a UV resistant matte spray or gloss spray, acrylic spray, you can protect it more from changing over time. Also, the more materials you use on top of it, you're gonna be pushing it back. So I've got a lot of things from oils to acrylics to a lot of different mediums on top. The acrylic's a sealer, so it's gonna seal it into place a little bit more. But if you were to leave that paper without doing anything to it, it could change over time. It's gonna oxidize there, it could actually fall apart. So in a way, the work itself is transformative and may not last, but I do heavily coat it with several things, so I think it's gonna outlast me.
Oh, yeah.
About the frames, they're obviously a choice because they're unusual and and they seem to warm up the images.
Yeah. So we started using these frames when my boyfriend and my friend Rena, we were all sitting around in a studio, and they had some silk screen frames that were messed up, and we were like, we came up with this idea. She works at a frame shop, second to none Marie, so they helped me with my mats and my glass. He is an amateur woodworker going to go professional one day, I think. And his father also helped us a bit from the beginning. And so between all of us, we came up with this idea to frame them, because I was doing abandoned places. And then I was focusing on some historical things where things were blowing up, they were being eroded in some way, something bad was happening. Always something gloom and doomy with me. But even with these, it just became a thing. And so I keep in mind the frames as well when I'm doing it, but the rust also works with that old idea. So we still leave some of the words and some of the weird stuff and stains on them, but we get the wood.
Yeah.
And that's originally what his father was helping us with. And so we've been creating these frames ourselves and have a large collection of silkscreen frames that we rework every time I have a show.
I love it. I love the concepts from the beginning. So we really make a good team.
Definitely. This was a great show.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.